Right. And you get to see my whirling crown as well.
Well, I love the wallpaper behind you. That is vibrant. It is so fun.
Thank you. This is actually my dining room, AKA the Tiny E Paper Laboratory.
I love that. Well, Erica, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me. I love these opportunities. So just thank you, thank you, thank you.
Absolutely. So the first thing I start with everybody is just tell me your name, your position, and your company.
So my name is Erica Halverson. I am the founder and CEO of Tiny E Paper.
And what is Tiny E Paper?
We are a company that makes 100% pure hemp paper, not only from hemp stalks, but also from post-extraction waste from CBD extractors. And our original mission was to get the entire cannabis industry on a B2B level. So no rolling papers, no consumer papers. I'm talking about business paper, packaging, labeling, receipt rolls, those types. But getting the entire cannabis industry to stop using trees and switch over to a self-sustaining resource as hemp. And then we get to be a model to everybody else as well.
I love that. I think it makes perfect sense for the cannabis industry to be utilizing all facets of this plant, including paper. So what brought you to starting this company?
Yeah, so I actually was working at the time for the largest vaporizer company in the cannabis side and in the vaporizer side. I was working for Pax and Juul, and at the time they were the same company. Juul is the nicotine, Pax is the cannabis vaporizer. And I just had a moment one day where I was looking at these vape pods that were in this box surrounded by tree trash. And I was like, wait a second, we're selling this medicine, this healing medicine to people, this wellness product in the most irresponsible way possible. And I thought that if I could just get the cannabis industry to understand that we have a renewable resource within our own house of hemp to be able to make things like packaging and things like that, where we don't have to be cutting down our valuable trees. So that's kind of what spurred the idea, is just having worked in the industry and looking at the things that we were doing already.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think we hear a lot about the wasteful packaging in cannabis and how much plastic is used and how much paper and how much tree waste, as you called it, is used. Right. And it's crazy that this medicine is contributing to such a huge trash problem.
Yep. And then on the other side too is the fact that I'm able to utilize the waste from the CBD extractors. The extractors, just one extractor every day is outputting tons and tons of waste. And what do they do with that? There are a few options. They can burn it for fuel. You can make hempcrete out of it. There's a lot of things that you can do with it, but I can also make paper out of it. And the really cool thing that I can do, let's say for a CBD extraction company, where they're out there selling, whether it's vape pods or tinctures, whatever, if I can take their waste, make their own packaging out of it, that is a huge brand story that I get to enhance brands with as well. So it's not just switching out hemp paper. I bring a value proposition to any CBD or THC company that's already in the industry, because it just rounds out their brand message of really understanding the magic of this plant and everything it can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said it enhances their brand story, because cannabis brands really have their hands tied behind their backs when it comes to advertising. There's not a lot you can do. So if you have that brand story that you can stand by and you can use to entice customers, it helps circumvent a lot of the problems of reaching new people.
Right. And then if we also realize that how we sell what we sell is as important as what we sell. And so if we're going to sell this wonderful product and surround it by something that is just totally irresponsible and harmful to the earth, that's taking away from what our mission is as an entire community. So that's also just putting that back into the whole brand of cannabis as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked to a couple people on the CBD production side, and I know one of the really common complaints is there just isn't the infrastructure right now for large scale manufacturing of CBD. So seeing somebody like you who's coming out here and saying, give me your waste, I can make something out of it, I think is a huge first step to being able to change that attitude and ultimately change the industrialization process for CBD.
Thank you. And that's one of the ways where I truly believe that we're going to be able to get where we want faster and easier if we truly all work together and figure out what our synergies are. Because there's a way, like, I can help the CBD industry, I can help them scale and put together a scaling strategy so that they always have an output for that waste and they're never having to build it up, never having to have a line on their P&L to have a third party come in and recycle it. And so there's a bunch of different ways, even working with processors. And I'm right now fundraising to buy my own processing equipment, like a decorticator. But I can work very well with other companies that make products out of the raw material that I don't use. For example, to make paper, I'm using mostly the bast fibers, which are the outside bark fibers of the hemp stalk. I don't use very much of the inner core, which is called the hurd. But there is one industry who uses a lot of hurd, and that happens to be horse bedding, kitty litter, and all of those types of things. And so I'm a really good partner for one of those companies because I'm going to give them 90% of that hurd that they need because I need mostly the bast. And that makes us a good partnership so we're never wasting any part of this plant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes to the mindset of a rising tide lifts all boats in this industry.
Absolutely. And I'm also a believer in the entourage effect. And if we're going to believe in the entourage effect, what does that mean for everything? It means the more people we have in our group, the louder noise we can make and the better impact we can have. So I'm just going to carry that on into how I do my business practice.
I love that. So what got you started with cannabis?
Great question. And thank you for asking, because it's kind of a weird, unique story. I actually lost almost 100 pounds with the help of cannabis.
Wow.
And it sounds like a really weird, backwards thing to say, but as I started my career and started doing more research on cannabinoids and different aspects of what the plant can do medicinally, I found out that they've isolated a cannabinoid called THCV. And THCV just happens to be an appetite suppressant. And it just happens to be dominant in African sativa strains, which happen to be grown mostly up in the Pacific Northwest, which is where I was born and raised. So I was up in Seattle smoking my regular herb, and I was losing my appetite and losing weight at the same time. And I couldn't explain it. Not only I couldn't explain it because it didn't make sense to me, like I should be getting an appetite and getting the munchies when I'm smoking cannabis, but that wasn't happening. But I also was still in my green closet, and I couldn't tell anybody that that cannabis was even part of my repertoire. It was even part of what I was doing. So it was kind of a weird dichotomy for me, having this wonderful medicine that I was so excited to have impact my life the way it was, but I couldn't tell anybody about it. And so now to be able to tell that story with not only the understanding of the science of it, and now they're actually isolating THCV and they're encapsulating it just for that appetite suppressant feature. But also it helps me really understand how cannabis really is a medicine to me. And still to this day, I am a daily consumer because it helps me with everything else aside of that, whether it's stress, anxiety, inflammation, when I start getting into terpenes and what those do. And so now cannabis is literally a part of my daily life.
I love a phrase you use there, the green closet.
Yeah. Yes, and then we have to make that decision to come out of our green closet and be public with what we're doing. And I believe that's a responsibility that we need to be aware of, because I'm now, ding, ding, my magic hat is now an advocate. And now I'm a cannabis advocate. So I believe that's one of our roles and one of our responsibilities when we decide to be a business owner in this industry, is we need to understand what that responsibility is holistically.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think a lot of people approach it that way. We know that we can't always be open about our cannabis use. We know that we felt shame and experienced stigma talking about it. But considering it like coming out of a cannabis closet, it is every single time you talk to somebody, what do you do? Oh, I work in the cannabis industry. And it just opens
And you
a
see the
whole
eyebrows
new world.
go up. Oh.
No. Yep. You either get people who are like, ooh, or people who are like, oh.
Yeah. Yep. That's kind of like the litmus test of which one are you, is we can have that what do you do for a living conversation right off the bat. But I'm also loud and proud. I've got my cannabis earrings on always. I have a THC tattoo. So when I made the decision, and I was going to be loud and proud about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other really fortunate thing, and this is kind of unique that I don't think we talk about enough, is we are creating our culture in real time. Everybody that is involved in the industry right now is helping to create that culture. And there's not a lot of industries where you get the chance to be a part of it from the very start. And I know cannabis has been around for a long time, but it's been underground for a long time. And again, that's a part of the culture. And we're now kind of in this new wave of creating this public culture versus just having the underground culture that we couldn't share. And it's a really exciting time for us.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. So as you look at the industry, what are you most excited about right now?
I am most excited about the innovation that I hear from just about everybody that I talk to in this industry. There are so many men and women doing some freakishly fantastic and innovative things with this plant, with services provided for it, with different things that you can do with all different parts of the plant. It's just wonderful. I think this is the most exciting time that cannabis has ever had because we're growing so fast that it blows my mind every single day to hear about all these ideas that people are working on, and to also meet equally passionate people, to know that I would say about 90 to 95% of our industry is as passionate as you and I are is awesome. And there's not a lot of industries that truly have people that are wholeheartedly invested in what this plant can do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you said, cannabis has been around for a long time, but the culture has been very much underground for the last 100 years. Mm-hmm. And now we really get to shape what it looks like for cannabis to be out and proud and in the open.
Yep. And we have a lot of the other unique thing is we have people within our own industry that have gone through that same struggle. We have our marginalized communities with our black and brown sisters and brothers who were taking the brunt of our icky stuff in our history. But we also have all of our LGBTQ plus, I know I'm missing some acronyms, but we have that whole part of our community that has already gone through their struggles and is already experiencing some of those things. And so, excuse me, it's also unique that we get to feed off of all the other people in our community that have gone through similar struggles that we are actually going through as an entire community now, which is getting over those stigmas and getting over the lack of education and lack of knowledge and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The lack of education or the sorting through all of the misinformation out there is a really big task for new users, and having good advocates in the industry is crucial for that.
Yeah. And we have to also understand that as icky of a word as regulation is, that is going to be one of the best ways for us to keep a consistent message to help that education flow. Because if we're calling one thing 5 different names and we can't come up and agree with one name to call that thing, how are we going to not confuse our consumer base? And one of my biggest aggravations with the industry right now happens to be specifically on the CBD side, where it is very easy to skirt some of the regulations that we already have. And we have people calling hemp oil CBD and making claims about this hemp oil, which comes from the seed with no cannabinoids, selling it as something that it's not. And that right away is already confusing consumers that believe that they're taking CBD that they got at a gas station. And that's not true. And it breaks my heart. And how do we get over that? how do we now re-educate people that got a bad taste in their mouth about something that really can help them because they were choosing snake oil and didn't know it. And that's the other problem that I think that we have to start being cognizant of, is how do we make sure that we're educating properly? And we need to come up with some of that within our own circle and deciding what we call things.
Yeah, absolutely. I've said it before on this blog, and I'll say it again. One of the basic tenets I always tell people: don't buy your CBD from a gas station. Never buy any CBD from a gas station.
No. Why would you buy anything of quality you want to put in your body at a gas station? It's called a gas station. It's not called a health station.
Yes. I don't even like buying snacks at the gas station most of the time. Yes, it's so hard for people who don't know a lot about this plant to navigate all of the, for lack of a better term, snake oil salesmen out there who have, this brown CBD flower and this hemp oil with no cannabinoids. And they're like, well, this doesn't do anything. And we're like, because it's not what you think it is.
It's not real.
Yeah.
But I do my own kind of reconnaissance missions here. And I'll go to some of around me. I've got plenty of, we sell CBD and all this other stuff. Come get your CBD from us. And I'll walk into the store, which is not a dispensary. You don't need to show your ID to get in. And I'll ask them, what part of the plant does your CBD come from? And I just want to see if they can know and tell me that it comes from the flower. Is it full spectrum and whole plant? Or do they know that hemp oil comes from the seed? And I can't tell you how many of them tell me that they don't know where it comes from. And that's the people working behind the counter.
Yeah. I do something very similar to my CBD dispensaries around here. The first thing I ask when I walk in is, where is this grown? If you can't tell me where this CBD is grown, I'm not interested in buying it from you because you don't know anything about it.
Yep, absolutely. And that's I think that we're going to start noticing a trend where consumers are going to start getting savvier with that kind of stuff as well. Consumers are already getting there on the sustainability side and starting to understand what sustainable packaging means and what that word means to different companies. I think consumers on the cannabis side are going to start getting savvier with their education and what they expect from brands. And especially on the medicinal side, understanding that if a person is going in with specific medical things that they're wanting to solve, they need to have somebody behind the counter that really knows what they're talking about, or they need to have enough information about the terpene profile, about the THC levels, about the CBD levels, to understand whether or not that product's going to work for them on their own based on their own research that they've done. And if a brand isn't providing that information, how are we supposed to know that that's terpene profile is right for me or not? And so I think consumers outside of working in the cannabis industry are going to start getting savvier to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really starts from the top and moves down as we gain a better understanding of what does this packaging need to have on here? What do I need to know as a consumer, understanding the plant like I do? And then how can I teach people who don't understand it like I do what they need to look for the best results? Yep.
And it goes down to even, I look at the harvest date and the package date. And if I notice there's only 2 or 3 weeks between those two numbers, I don't buy it because they don't know what curing is. Like there's little things like that I know because I grow my own weed and I like the process and I'm interested in the process. So that's why I'm educated on it. But regular people don't look at package date and pick date on the weed that they buy because they don't care. And we need to start training consumers that they should care. It's something that you're putting in your body. We should care about everything that goes into our body.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's part of the lasting impact of the war on drugs because people hear cannabis and they're like, oh, if this just gets me high, I don't need to think about it. I don't need to think about the terpene profile, the cannabinoid profile, how long it was cured, how long it's been sitting on this shelf, what my reactions are. Like
knowing that just asking how much THC it has in it and saying, oh, it's got 80% THC, that's going to get me stoned. Not necessarily. First of all, does it really have like 86% THC where like, let's start really testing because we're finding out that testing for that kind of stuff isn't really as good as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But then also getting consumers to understand that your endocannabinoid system responds differently to everything. Your receptors are not going to take 86% THC and necessarily get you stonier than a 23 or a 32% THC, because that profile, the cannabinoid profile, is going to be better for you based on whatever that strain is. So I think honestly, I think there's people in cannabis that need to be educated on that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. There are still a lot of people who are like, oh, I just want the highest THC percentage available because I know it was grown in a greenhouse under the best lights and watering condition. Okay,
right.
That's true, but is the highest THC percentage the best for your ECS? Because for me, no, it is not.
Right. And I also can wake up to an indica and fall asleep to a sativa. So I don't even like that we're using indica and sativa for day and night type things, because again, that's not true for everybody's endocannabinoid system.
Yes, I spend so much time explaining to people that those tell you what plant it was grown from. It does not tell you what effect it's going to have on your body.
Yes. And I always kind of also equate this to antidepressants, because I just know a lot of people that have been on antidepressants at some point in their life. Mm-hmm. And it's just a very well-known thing that when you start on antidepressants, you very rarely end up with the same medicine that you start out on. You have to try things and give it time and allow your body to regulate to it and figure out what your body wants. It's the exact same thing with cannabis.
Yeah.
What strain's going to work best for you, Mr. X or Mrs. X? I don't know. I know what works for me. I don't know what works for you. You're going to have to try it. And isn't that the fun part?
You get to experiment and try all these strains.
Go have fun and try everything you can and document it. That's something that I need to get better at too, is documenting what strains do what for you, and then creating like a little journal, a cannabis journal. And there's different apps. There's a lot more technology that's coming out now that helps consumers with that, but it's very easy just to write down. I had some cereal milk this morning, and my word, that was awesome, and here's why. And then I came back the next day and I had some OG something Kush, and I didn't like it, threw me into the couch, and I couldn't even get off of the couch for 2 hours. Mm-hmm. Well, let's notate that. Like, we need to get better at having that kind of journaling for our own usage.
Yeah. I think a lot of it goes back to what you were saying about having one term for these kind of things. You know, people think marijuana, weed, cannabis, and they don't think of the full spectrum of this plant because they don't understand it. Yep,
absolutely. And for me, it's fun to learn about.
Yeah.
So I hope that it's fun for other people to learn about too. I mean, it's exciting.
It is really exciting. For you, obviously, sustainability is a big part of your business because you're taking this waste from people and you're turning it into something usable. And that's something that we see a lot of in the cannabis industry, is this push towards sustainability. So what kind of clicked in your head when you were looking at this packaging and deciding to do something about it?
I don't know. It was literally, I just had a light bulb moment. And then I started doing a ton of research and found out that nobody in the States was making 100% pure hemp paper, and nobody was focusing on cannabis. And then I started researching CBD and found out that they are producing all this waste. And I had my product developer that was the first person ever to do 100% rolling papers and wrapping papers. And he had tried using the CBD waste. And I said, well, hey, why don't we see if we can use this for regular paper as well? As we kept doing more research and development and figuring out how versatile all different parts of the plant were, whether it's pre-extraction, post-extraction, considered trash or waste or not, we can use a lot of it for paper. Then what I started thinking about is really, how can we utilize this plant holistically and not consider any of it trash? And that got me thinking about another idea to create a self-sustaining ecosystem where all of the waste from my farmers and from my extractors that I can't use for paper, I'm going to work with an eco-recycling company that's going to make living soil. That living soil will go back to my farmers, which gives them higher quality product, better yields, which gives me higher quality product and better yields. And that's how we create a self-sustaining ecosystem. And I'm even looking at some things that I can do with the root ball of the plant, because the root ball has some different features to it than the outside stalk does. And so trying to to tap into some of those features and see if I can't hone those in on adding them to my paper and things like that too. But that's kind of how the whole thing started. Is it started with an idea and it just kept snowballing. The more and more the word sustainable started growing for me. And that's kind of also the interesting thing, is the word sustainable means so many different things, dependent on your industry, dependent on your business, dependent on who you are as a person, dependent on the product that you sell, and everybody can have a hand in it. So that's why sustainability is it's more than a buzzword now. And there's organizations like the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, now has sustainable packaging as their number 3 initiative for all of their sustainable goals through 2022. And there's more companies like Amazon, Apple, Costco, IKEA, all of them have sustainable packaging now as part of their mission statement and all of their standards moving forward. So I think that that is what's helping the push for consumers becoming more savvy about the word sustainable, is that businesses and organizations are becoming more thoughtful about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love a point you touched on, where your waste from creating paper then turns into living soil that can go back to your farmers. That just, that touches so many problems that we're having in the industry right now.
Yes. And it helps keep that synergy with my farmer partners, because it's all part of the circle. When I say working together, we can make a lot more noise than if we're all separated. And so really what I'm trying to show is that just making hemp paper can have a touch in every single aspect of the cannabis community and industry, whether it's from the farmers and supporting them, because I would love to buy direct from farmers. That's why I'm forming farmer partnerships, so I can make sure to pay them a fair market value. Mm-hmm. I can directly process for them, process for everyone else. Once I can get the money and funding I need to buy my equipment, that can help anybody else that needs hemp processed for textiles or biofuels or anything, because one of the funky things about this plant, you can't do anything with the stalk unless it's processed in some way. Whether it's decortication, chopping it up, retting it, whatever it is, something has to happen to it in order for it to be usable. Mm-hmm. So when you talked about the CBD industry having a break in their supply chain, on the industrial side, we very much have a break in our supply chain as well, because we're a nascent industry. And so that's why I'm trying to get the equipment I need to fill in the holes of that supply chain. And there's other companies that are out there doing the same thing as well. So you also talked about what's really exciting. Another really exciting for me specifically is where the industrial hemp industry will be in the next 3 to 5 years. I think we're finally getting the attention we deserve. I think we're finally coming up to par as showing our importance, as much of an importance as the CBD side of the hemp plant is. And I think we're starting to right the supply and demand imbalance that we had back from 2019, where we had so much CBD being grown that we did not have enough of a demand for it. And we had so little industrial hemp being grown that we couldn't have a supply. Mm-hmm. And so now we're finally starting to normalize that stuff. And that's really what gets me excited specifically about this side of the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. The industrial side of hemp and, turning it into paper and hempcrete and clothing is still in its infancy compared to the recreational side. Yes, it is. But again, working together, we're all going to get there, because we all use different parts of the plant for different things. Even for the textiles, about 2/3 of our processing is about the same. And then they have a completely different arm of the supply chain, because they have to cottonize and they have to do different things to the fiber than I need for paper. Mm-hmm. So we all got to work together. Yeah. And that's how we're going to scale the industry together as well. Yeah, absolutely. So you've touched on some great points about sustainability and inclusion in this industry, and how cannabis is really being utilized to lift all of these boats together. So as a business owner in this industry, what does social equity and inclusion mean to you? Well, I will tell you, I hate the words social equity. Okay. Hate them. And I'm going to give you a great example why. Because the social equity program that we built in cannabis, all it did is divide us, because nobody
that doesn't need a license for their business got to be included in social equity. So guess what? I was completely left out of every single social equity program. That's not solving our problem. All it did is divide us up again into two different parts of this industry, those who need a license and those who don't. And what makes you think that people who need a license need funding and need help any more than I do on the non-licensed side? So the first thing we need to do is come up with a better term, because it's not equitable right now. And we are not being inclusive. And I think that is the first step to understanding how we fix this problem, is what the problem is. There was a report that just came out this week from MJ Biz that showed that both minorities and women are losing ground, specifically in the cannabis industry. Both of our groups now have fallen below the amount of CEOs and people in leadership position at companies below the national average for any other industry. That is a direction where if we continue to shut out minorities and women, we will not be able to sustain the cannabis industry as a whole. And that's what social equity means to me. You've touched on a point with me that gets me really fired up and really passionate, because social equity is supposed to include everybody, and all it's done is show us that we're not. And too many times, women like me will talk about the problems that we're having on our side with leadership positions and losing women in this industry, and we get ignored by men, and we get ignored by other women. And we get told that we're just being emotional about it. And we're told that we need to just work harder. And that's not true. We need everybody to understand what the problem is, because everybody has to change in order for it to get fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you raise a lot of good points there. There is kind of this co-option of social equity as this thing that just pays lip service to nice ideas in the industry, while all of the funding goes to these white finance bros who don't need the money, who don't need the assistance, but are able to just jump the line.
Yep. And then they found out in LA, they had to put the entire social equity program on hold because they had to go through an audit, because they found out that there were white men coming in, bribing and paying off social equity applicants and taking their applicant space with that minority person as the face of the company. And they were totally backed by this white investment group. And that's not what the program was built for. No. And so social equity to me, just kind of going back to what you asked about that term, is we need to redefine it, because what it means right now is diddly squat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you raise a lot of valid points there. There is kind of this power struggle in the industry right now between people who are passionate about this plant and want to create an incredible industry, and people who just want to make a lot of money real quick.
Yep. And we can smell them from a mile away. And that's why they have to be sneaky about how they get in here.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're going to find them.
They're the ones with the friends in high places who can kind of skirt in these back doors. Well, I mean, you look at like the Illinois social equity program, where they're on like their third iteration of the lottery drawing at this point, second or third, because the lottery drawing awarded these crazy licenses to businesses that you're like, statistically, that is impossible. But this business got 3 licenses out of a lottery drawing.
Yes. And on the other side too, even with grants and with any government funded program or anything else that was money that was given to this industry, there was just a grant. There's an association that is involved in the hemp side of the industry that got a bunch of their fellows, mostly men, to sign off on this thing to try to get $1 billion for their side of the industry only. Well, wait a second. You left out people like my company who are buyers of that raw material. And if you don't include companies like mine on initiatives like this, you're going to start killing our companies off. Because you're not including us in the whole supply chain of where that funding is going. If you give a lot of money and build a lot of processors, but you're not processing the material in the way that I need for paper, you're not doing me any good. And so you have to include me in the conversation, because I'm going to be utilizing a lot of that material. And if you're going to force me to go to Europe, that is not what this industry needs. And so we need to get better about including everybody that has a holistic part of this plant, part of the supply chain, part of the seed to sale model. We need to involve all pieces of that in every single discussion that we're having about this. We need more of our people, consumers and advocates that are in government, that are part of the bodies that are making these rules and regulations, because I think that's also another problem we're having, is we have people that this plant has never touched personally, making all the rules for those of us that it has. And that's a little bass backwards too.
Yeah, yeah,
we got a lot of problems, but they're all solvable.
Yes, they are. So as you've been on this journey with your business, what is something that you are incredibly proud of that you might not get to talk about a lot?
Oh, wow. That's a really loaded question, but you just gave me goosebumps all over. Because recently I've just kind of been going through a lot of personal growth. That's what being an entrepreneur does sometimes when you're doing something like this. I just never understood quite what the meaning of self-pride is. And I don't mean that in a boastful or conceited way, but we should be proud of who we are as individuals and what we're capable of. And I got to tell you, I've never been more proud of myself and the struggles that I have had to go through just getting to this point, the things that I have had to do to get by. I mean, like, I'm not ashamed to say I'm on food stamps right now. I'm on a government program to help pay my rent because I'm struggling. And if I didn't have those programs, I wouldn't be here right now. And that's a humbling experience to go through. But now that I've gone through that and I'm coming out on the other side, I'm now accepting orders for my business. I'm earning revenue for the first time. I've gotten through 4 years of literal blood, sweat, and tears to get to this place. I can't tell you the confidence I have in myself now that I can literally take any challenge that the universe throws at me, anything, and I know I can get through it. And that's powerful. And it's a freedom that I can't explain. And it's I say this a lot, that starting this company has been the hardest, most humbling, most challenging, most educational, most personal growing, most exciting, most awesome experience that I have ever gone through in my life. And I wouldn't change it for the world.
I love that. It sounds like an incredibly liberating feeling to look back at what you've done and know that you are capable of amazing things.
It is, but I think we all need to do that more and understand that it's not what we go through that defines us as people. It's how we get through it, because everybody goes through BS. Everybody goes through struggles and everybody goes through difficult times, but not everybody gets through it in the same way. And I think that we need to be better as humans in general. And I'll even drill it down specifically. I think we need to be better as women in acknowledging our strengths and where we excel and where we have the power to do things, because I think we like to put ourselves in a corner and put ourselves in the back burner too much. And I think that's the other thing I'm most proud of, is I've found my voice as a woman in this industry, and I'm not scared to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something about stepping into your own business, being the face of it, that for the first time you're like, I can say whatever the hell I want and nobody can tell me no.
But that goes both ways. Every failure and every success with this company is my fault.
Mm-hmm.
Period. Like, there's no other way around that. So that's a big responsibility that I take to heart. And I've got my board of directors and I've got other people on my team. I did start this company alone, but I have not done any of this by myself. I've had a wonderful support system of friends and family and of investors and advisors and board members that I literally would not be here without all the people in my life that have helped me and supported me on this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you're working with customers, people are coming to you for the first time. What do you want them to take away from an experience with Tiny e-Paper?
Well, right now, I'd like them to come away with, I don't know, it's hard. I need patience right now. This is a hard process to get started. And I just tell everybody who's asking me for quotes off the bat and asking me for orders and things right now, just to have patience and understand that the industry is not where it needs to be quite yet. Tiny e-paper is not quite where it needs to be yet, but we're going to get there together. And I just appreciate everybody that jumps on board and understands. I guess understanding is what I'm looking for customers, but just understanding that this is difficult and I need to start building repeatable processes to get this train moving. So I'll admit I've dropped the ball a couple times and I apologize. I've apologized profusely to some folks because things have taken a little longer than I wanted, or I wasn't able to fulfill a quote because I found out that there's no manufacturer in the United States that wants to touch that type of product related to cannabis. So now I have to work that into my investment plan. So it's just been it's been interesting. Every single order that has come across has had a different challenge behind it. And it's just been part of the process of ironing all of that out and getting to a place where I can, again, have a repeatable process and do the same thing over and over again. But it's a process. Yeah. It's not easy. We're doing all of this for the first time.
Yeah, it's one thing to talk about not having the systems of scale in place to create these things. It's another thing to be on the customer on the other end and say, I love this idea. Wait, what do you mean it's going to take 3 months? It's paper.
Right. But on the same side too, I have to explain to people that I know pricing isn't where it needs to be, because right now I don't have a supply chain in the United States where I can get my raw material from here. Soon. But right now I have to pay for material coming from Europe, and that adds cost that makes a difference right now. So that's one thing that I'm really looking forward to, is when I can turn all of my facilities over stateside. That is going to immediately help all of my costs and things like that. So we're going to get there, but that's why I appreciate all the customers I have now and everybody that helps this point. We're hemp pioneers together. Yeah. And that's the other thing I tell companies. You are the first company that is going to make the switch for this product. And that's a big deal. So it's kind of a little give and take and a little push and pull right now, where I need a little bit from the customers I have in order to give them a lot more in return, but we're going to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said hemp pioneers, because it is, you have this pride of being first, but then you have to deal with the challenges that come with being first that people after you are not going to have to consider.
True. And the other thing too is I don't want to get people hooked on hemp paper and then I go 6 months and I can't supply anything. And then I have to get the people excited again. And then I have to pump the brakes again. I have to be ready for that flow to be continuous. And so I have to make sure that I'm ready for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that you're really excited to see the industrial side of the hemp in 3 to 5 years. What else are you excited about in the industry right now?
I am excited to see the growth of women in this industry. I'm excited to see more women coming into it. I'm excited to see more acquisitions and mergers come through where women come through as leaders. And I'm excited to see the reverse trend of what's going on right now with minorities and women just in leadership positions, in getting VC money and any type of investment money. I'm really excited to see that trend turn around, because I'm going to say it again, it can't keep going in the direction it's going. We just can't sustain ourselves as an industry if it does. So I'm excited to see who starts leading that charge and what types of companies start leading that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think in, 5 to 10 years, the industry is going to look like?
That's a loaded question. I don't know. I think we're going to be on such a different global scale. I think there's going to be a lot more partnerships with other countries, because that's kind of another unique thing that we have in cannabis is we are growing as an industry globally at the same time. And that doesn't happen a lot in history. And so we've got a really unique opportunity right now to be able to partner up with different parts of the world. And also that gives us scaling opportunities as well. So I'm excited to see where we come as an entire world together in this industry and what magic we can make.
Yeah. Yeah, you make such a good point there that worldwide things are just changing at such an unprecedented level. If you told me back in 2015 that in 2021, Canada and Mexico would both have legalized weed and the US would be working on it, I'd have told you were high.
Oh my God, like what world do we live in right now? Yeah, there's just things like that. And it's crazy to think of where we've been and where we've come in such a short amount of time to this point, that the next 5 years seems like light years to me.
Yeah, I think you could make any number of predictions and most of them would have at least a grain of truth in them.
Yes.
So just from a recreational standpoint, from a user perspective, if somebody's coming into cannabis for the first time, what's something you think they need to know before experiencing it?
Let's see. I think that coming into cannabis for the first time, I guess the first thing is understanding what cannabis is to your person. Like understanding that you do have an endocannabinoid system with CBD and THC receptors that were built for this plant. That's like number one to me, is just understanding that and how truly helpful to your entire system and its homeostasis this entire plant can be. On the other side as well, I hope that people getting into having a passion for cannabis will also look at our history and understand how we got here, the people that had an important part in our history, what we mean when we say the term OG and what that means to people that we recognize as OGs, and just kind of the history of the war on drugs and how much that has impacted our community and communities that don't even know they were impacted. The amount of people that have never gotten to experience cannabis because of the war on drugs is just abominable to me. The fact that this medicine has been kept from people for this long is not right. And so I hope that people that get into this would want to understand more of that, to give them a bigger appreciation for now where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
because I think a lot of people think that literally the cannabis industry just popped out of nowhere and started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of people coming to cannabis for the first time means first accepting that most of the things they know about cannabis are wrong. And that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. Yep. And knowing that this is not a drug. Hemp and cannabis, yes, they're the same but different. Like, there's all that kind of stuff. It seems simple, but it's scary how many people that are within this industry even that don't understand some of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing your time with me. I have one more question that I always like to end with.
Yeah.
What is your favorite fun fact about cannabis?
Oh, my favorite fun fact about cannabis. Wow, that's a big one. Fun fact. Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's crazy. I don't know that there's, I guess I would say the biggest fun fact to me is that cannabis can actually take your appetite away as well as give you the munchies. Like, that's fun for me to be able to explain to people. Mm-hmm. And I have to explain some of the science in order to explain that. And so it kind of triggers people a little bit to say, oh, there's something a little bit interesting about this plant. THCV? Whoa, I didn't know that there were isolations of this kind of stuff and things like that. I don't know. I guess that's the most fun thing for me right now, is explaining my story, because it's just such a backwards thing for people to hear about weed in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you
tell that's a good question.
I love hearing what people say, because there are so many things that are fun about cannabis. And when you tell that story, you're introducing to them the concepts of cannabinoids and how different cannabinoids can have different effects on you. And it's not just THC and getting high and sitting on the couch and eating a bag of Doritos. Like, all of these chemicals impact you so differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just want to say a special thank you to you as well. Every time I get to talk about what I'm doing with hemp, talk about everything that we've talked about to whatever kind of audience, it warms my heart. So thank you very much for your time and for giving me this space as well. I really, truly appreciate it.
So glad to have the chance to talk with you and share what you're doing. I love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thanks to you too. And thanks for what you're doing. I mean, we need people like you to be talking about this and getting people like me out here. So thank you as well.
Absolutely. Just try to get me to shut up about cannabis.